Okay, so here's the issue with the DSG swap. I had two transmissions. The first one I got was from a Mark II Audi TT. So 3.2 all-wheel drive. Perfect. Exactly what I need. That transmission unfortunately had a blown mechatronic. Now, the piece that's blown inside the mechatronic is theoretically this guy, and 215 valve, I believe. Anyways, so that's popped. So that part technically not available. Have to buy a whole mechatronic on its own. Was able to find that part online, but it was going to take like a month, and it did. It took about a month to get here, and possibly isn't a full fix. Done my research. I'm also an idiot, but I've done my research, and there's people in Europe where these are much more abundant transmissions that repair these things. They rebuild these mechatronic units because the mechatronic is insanely expensive, and what blows is these valves. There's, I don't know, 6 or 7 of them in the transmission. I think 3 of them are that one, and then the other 4 are a different style or size. Different size. Ooh. Anyways, while I was waiting for that, I found another transmission that theoretically would work. Now, the issue being that theory is not correct. The transfer case, the bevel box is different, which means the half shafts are different, which means the CV shafts are different. Now, the Mark II CV shafts line up fine. It goes into the Tiguan hub, no problem. Sorry, the Mark II. The Mark I shafts do not. I cannot find an option that works. That's factory or aftermarket. I would have to get a custom CV shaft done. Custom CV shafts, one, nowhere really local does them. No one can really get me an answer on it. Now, there is probably somewhere in Toronto or something that could do it. 1, how much cost? 2, how much time would that take? 3, would it be right? How do I get those measurements perfect? So there's a lot of question marks with doing that. So I already had the other transmission, swap it in, tried to then swap the actual bevel boxes. They look pretty much the same. Numbers on them match. I need to find the actual part numbers on them somewhere to see if those match. I can guarantee they don't. There's going to be a super section that's different. There's a couple different things on the bevel boxes. So this piece here and how this goes to the transmission or transfer case portion of the transmission, and these legs as well as this are ever so slightly different dimensions. So you can actually, the best way to see it is this lip here compared to that. So that causes an issue with actually swapping this unit. Okay, fine. The easier way to do it anyways is to swap the half shafts. Here, I'll spin it. Actually, I'm going to set the phone down. I'm going to take these out, and I'm going to show you what they look like out. Be easier to handle. Okay, so with these 2 half shafts out, flanges, whatever you want to call them, I see different terminology. I don't know. Whatever. With them out, you can see they are a dramatically different length. Part of this explains why the different CV shafts, even though they're close to the same length, are completely different. Once you actually see this out and apart. With it all together, it looks pretty close to the same, and honestly almost measures the same when you measure everything out, but they don't work. So this half shaft can't go in that bevel box because of all of those elements. So it's not as easy as swapping them. The driver's side one that goes into the actual transmission, completely different story. Exact same, swap over, perfect. So the other issue, so to talk about the CV shafts, is you can see the actual end is different. So the cup on the end is different, which means the CV shafts aren't transferable. Now, it's not as easy as an adapter spacer to make the end of the CV shaft fit in here. even if you could swap everything over, because the bolt alignment is different. So one's 100 millimeters center of bolt, the other one is 108 or something like that. They're crazy close. I think it's much closer than that. One might be 108, 110. Depending on what DSG you're talking about. These are all different, so you have to be careful on that. So essentially what it comes down to is there's a whole whack of things that just simply do not line up. It's like taking, people always use this, that Volkswagens are like Lego, Audis, whatever. These are both Audi pieces. Anyways, VWAG. It's like, in this particular scenario, with the parts that I have and have been able to find, that's another thing, I'm in Canada, so remember, things are completely different to find here than they are to find in the States, or especially Europe. But anyways, it's like taking off-brand Lego and trying to connect it with regular Lego. Some stuff works, some stuff doesn't, and even then, it's not quite right. Don't really want to also take chances with things not being lined up, because these shafts seal. They once they slide in, they act as the seal that holds fluid in these bevel boxes. So if they don't go in perfectly, even if they're still snug and don't feel like they're going to wobble, they don't seal fluid. Also, once you put 300 crank, that's a lot different than me trying to manually. I don't have 300 horsepower, so they're gonna wobble. So there's no point in trying to just band-aid this and make it work. So I'm gonna try one more time to confirm all this, but essentially what's gonna happen is take that Mark II TT transmission apart. Now by apart, I gotta just pull this off. This is our connector. This goes to the mechatronic. So pull off this. Probably gonna then also swap it with the other transmission to get rid of this dent. But that was for me, by the way. I dropped the transmission. Not dropped it, but yeah. Anyways, so inside here you can then pull out the mechatronic, and then I can pull the mechatronic apart and replace this valve. That transmission will then go back in the vehicle to get tested. The crappy part is, like I just in the vehicle to get tested, you cannot just get the transmission over there, plug it in, turn on the computer, not turn it over and scan it and confirm that it's good. Reason being, the part does not fail until you drive it and or do adaptations. Now, without doing adaptations, the vehicle won't drive, it won't move, it won't pinch the clutches. Again, probably because that's blown. So I have to fully remove the other Mark I transmission, fully install the Mark II transmission, put everything back together, do my clutch adaptations, try to drive the car. If it doesn't work, buy a third transmission, buy an actual full known good mechatronic. Do you buy another used one? I mean, sure you could, and then you're going to trust it. I trusted somebody buying this first transmission. I got screwed. Try not to be too bitter about that. Don't really know who to blame it on. Comes down to my fault, my problem. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. That's what we're doing today. And I'm hoping by end of day Saturday, Friday today, I'm hoping by the end of day Saturday I've had enough time and had enough luck that I've got this all back together ready to be tested. What I mean by luck, I've had a nightmare pulling these transmissions. I'm doing this pulling it apart easy, no problem. I can have the transmission out in a matter of a couple of hours, from fully assembled to out. Not a big deal. What causes a huge headache is trying to put the transmission back in, lining it up where there's no wiggle room with putting a transmission in a car. It is dead on. You have to be smack on. The teeth need to line up from the engine to the transmission, and then you got to get the bolt holes to line up. It's like Doing that on a garage floor without having a hoist or anything, or a proper stand for the transmission, while also having the engine on a crane, causes a lot of problems. You got to try to align it, and nothing is level, nothing is perfect. So you're messing around, you know, trying to use this guy to level out the engine, because the engine will be on the crane, and then the transmission is on my floor jack with that piece of wood to keep it as level as possible. It's wobbly, the transmission's not balanced, and you got to try to get it in there and made it to that. So what I've actually found is to actually get the transmission mostly in place, set it on blocks of wood, get it stagnant. It cannot move. It's stable. And then move my engine around using the crane and that tilt and different heights, whatever, to push that into the transmission. It's a headache. It is a disaster. I've done it in 20 minutes. I've had it just pop together. Got lucky. And I've had it take me 7 hours twice, just messing with it, trying to figure out solutions. And then that's when I found out that, you know, set the transmission down, get it on a stable surface, and then you can make the engine to it being the best method. So that 7 hours isn't actually, you know, sitting there wiggling. It's me trying different methods of how does this go together in this scenario. So yeah, and again, this is a crazy tight engine bay. This engine, this transmission are not meant to be in here. They fit, yes. Do I see why Volkswagen didn't do it? Yep, 100%. I see why Volkswagen did not put this combo together. Obviously, with their engineering, they could have played with, you know, your engine mounts and stuff like that to get the engine and everything at a perfect height so that things clear better. But as it is close to the frame rails. Very, 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 very close. I'll show you the transmission still into. Like, you're real close there, so you don't have a lot of wiggle room to kind of move the engine around too much. And I don't know how well you can see that down there, but your frame rail to the top of the transmission is insanely close. I don't actually know how close the factory setup is. I had one in this car, and I never would have purposely looked at that. But I would assume this is way closer. You know, engines obviously move in the engine bay slightly. If I didn't have upgraded mounts, I think this would actually contact on acceleration. So I could be wrong. Don't know. I'm not an engineer. So that's where we're at. That's what we're doing today. I'm gonna upload this video, and then I'll, you know, take little clips, another final video at the end to let you know how things go. But this will go on my YouTube, not my Instagram, because obviously this is 13 minutes in. It's a long video, a lot of talking. Yeah, you guys can enjoy it, and stay tuned for the next post, which is hopefully me driving this thing out of that garage finally for the final time. One really, really motivating factor is the fact that so obviously I've had this running, I've had this moving, I've driven this around the block and found these issues, found these clearance problems, found out that the hub wasn't fully seated with the CV shaft, and that's what my grinding was. And it sounds like a backing plate, and then I find out it's actually the wheel bearing, like, so probably also cooked a wheel bearing. Anyways, the one really promising and motivating factor here is I've always dealt with rev hang with revving this in neutral. So, you know, you show up to something, or somebody wants to hear the exhaust, somebody wants to hear that Wookiee, they want to hear that VR, you rev it and it sounds great, but then it just sounds like garbage as it cycles down, because it holds it so high, so long, holds the revs there. Putting this transmission in with that lighter flywheel instead of the heavy fluid-filled torque converter is night and day. It revs up way faster. The revs climb significantly quicker, and they also fall instantly based on how the DSG works. So that is super motivating. I feel like going into this was like, you know what, this is a solution to my failed factory Passat transmission. And maybe I'll get a little bit quicker shifts. I think it's going to be a completely different ball game to drive. I feel like the acceleration is going to be a lot better regardless of shifting, because of that considerably lighter flywheel. There's way less weight on that drivetrain, with that rotational force. So I feel like it's going to be a huge difference. I also have a friend who just finished his Golf 2.5 6-speed DSG swap, so that's cool. Alex finally has that done and driving. Yeah, so he's noticed a huge difference. So I'm very excited to get this thing going, get this thing driving. I'm hoping this works. If not, we're back to trying to search for a Passat transmission, and honestly going back to that factory setup. But yeah, that's where we're at.